What if a single phone call meant for someone else was the one thing that could change your entire life? She was just the cleaning lady, invisible, unnoticed, forgotten. But the moment she picked up that ringing phone and answered in perfect Arabic, everything shifted. Her boss froze. The billionaire caller was stunned. In less than 24 hours, she went from wiping down tables to negotiating a $50 million deal and sitting at the same table as the world's most powerful investors. But success wasn't the only thing waiting for her. Someone from her past was watching, someone who didn't want her to rise again. What happens when the world finally sees your worth, but the shadows from your past come knocking? Stay with us, because the twist in this story will hit harder than you expect. This was supposed to be just another Tuesday. Grace Nolan tied her hair into a loose ponytail, tugged on her worn cleaning gloves, and started her shift in the massive, echoing estate perched on the edge of the Columbia River in Portland. The house always felt more like a luxury museum than a home. Pristine, expensive, emotionally cold. Just like its owner, Ethan Wilder. Ethan was rarely around. A multi-millionaire investor known for his cutthroat instincts, he was usually traveling from city to city, New York, Zurich, London. Grace had only seen him in person a handful of times since she was hired nearly 9 months ago. Their conversations never stretched beyond stiff greetings, which was fine. Grace didn't need small talk. She needed the paycheck, desperately. Her phone buzzed quietly in her apron pocket, but she ignored it. She was focused on scrubbing the deep grooves of the hand-carved mahogany table in the center of the office. The scent of wood polish filled the air as she hummed along to the faint music in her earbuds, until the mansion's landline began to ring. Loud, sharp, unrelenting. Grace froze. That wasn't her business. The house phone was off limits. Yet it rang again, and again, 15 times. She looked around. The estate was silent. "I shouldn't," she whispered to herself, but something, call it curiosity or intuition, urged her forward. She slipped off her gloves and slowly picked up the receiver. "Wilder residence, good morning," she said cautiously. There was a pause, and then a man's voice spoke. Deep, precise, and unmistakably speaking Arabic. Grace blinked. She hadn't heard that language since college, since her former life, since before she was someone who cleaned other people's homes. Without missing a beat, she responded in flawless Arabic. "Mr. Wilder's not available at the moment. May I assist you?" There was silence on the line. Then the man chuckled softly. "You speak Arabic beautifully. I'm Douglas Kane, calling from Geneva. I have a time-sensitive proposal for Mr. Wilder regarding a multi-million-dollar development." Grace's pen moved instinctively, jotting notes on the closest piece of paper. She asked follow-up questions with natural fluency. They discussed climate contractors and international tax laws gracefully as if it were her job, which it wasn't, not anymore. But what she didn't know was that Ethan Wilder had come home early, and he was standing in the hallway, listening and stunned. He watched hidden behind the doorframe as Grace carried on an articulate, high-level conversation in a language he had spent years trying to master. Her accent was impeccable. Her phrasing wasn't textbook, it was regional, expressive, rich with cultural nuance. How he'd thought she was just a cleaner, shy, quiet, invisible. But this woman, this was someone else entirely. Grace finished the call with a polite promise to pass on the message. She hung up, turned, and jumped with a gasp. Ethan stood right there, arms folded, eyebrows raised. She nearly dropped the phone. "Mr. Wilder, I didn't know you were back. I'm sorry, You speak Arabic?" he asked, cutting straight to the point. Grace looked down, embarrassed. "Just a little, sir." "I didn't mean to." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "A little, that wasn't a little. That was native level." She bit her lip. "I didn't think it was relevant to my job." Ethan stepped into the room, slowly studying her, as if seeing her for the very first time. "Grace, who are you?" The question hung in the air, and she didn't know how to answer. He picked up the paper she'd written on. "You spoke to Douglas Kane?" She nodded. "Yes. He said the proposal involves a $50 million hospitality expansion. He mentioned the Geneva group wants to collaborate with your firm. Something about needing local American partnership and cultural consultants." Ethan stared at her, and then, as if his brain finally snapped into gear, he said, You may have just saved the biggest deal of my year. Grace's hands trembled. Am I in trouble? No, Ethan said, almost laughing. You're about to be in a lot more than that. She blinked, unsure if it was a threat or something else entirely. Grace, he said more softly, how long have you worked for me? 8 months. And never once mentioned you were fluent in Arabic. I didn't think I'd ever need to. I used to work in language consulting, but after some failed interviews and a lot of rejection, well, people don't usually want a cultural analyst who looks like me. What do you mean? Ethan frowned. I'm a Latina woman from the East Side. When I walk into corporate interviews, I'm diverse on paper, until I'm not polished enough in person. The silence between them was thick. Ethan felt something twist inside his chest. Guilt, regret. Maybe both. How many languages do you speak? He finally asked. Grace sighed. Fluently, 5. English, Spanish, Arabic, French, and Portuguese. And I can manage in basic Mandarin and German. Ethan almost dropped the paper. And you clean houses? He asked in disbelief. I have bills, rent, my mom's medication, student loans. Her voice grew quieter. I take what work I can get. Ethan sat down, stunned. You're an asset, a powerhouse. Why haven't I ever seen you? Because you weren't looking. The words weren't cruel, just true. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. I need to call Mr. Kane back. Now. But I want you there, as my assistant. Grace blinked. What, you heard me? But I don't have anything to wear. Then we'll get you something. That's not important. Grace's eyes filled with uncertainty. Why are you doing this? Ethan paused. The answer wasn't simple. Because I think I've made a mistake for 8 months, and you just proved you're someone who deserves far more than this job. She stared at him, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or run. He held out the note. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. downtown. You'll be at the meeting. Her breath caught in her throat. Okay, and just like that, everything changed. What Grace didn't know was that this opportunity wouldn't just reopen the door to her career, it would redefine who she was, how she loved, and how far she could go. But not everyone would accept her sudden rise, and someone was already watching her very closely. If you were Grace, would you have picked up the phone? Why or why not? Do you believe society often overlooks people with real talent because of their background or appearance? What do you think Ethan is really feeling about Grace right now? Admiration, guilt, or something deeper? Let us know in the comments. Grace Nolan stood in front of the floor-length mirror in a high-end boutique she had never dared step into before. She barely recognized herself. The navy blue blazer hugged her shoulders with precision, the crisp white blouse tucked neatly into tailored slacks. Her hair, once always in a messy bun for cleaning shifts, now fell in soft, sleek waves. Her makeup was minimal but elegant. For the first time in years, she looked like the version of herself she used to imagine, before survival forced her to settle. You look incredible, Ethan said, standing behind her, his voice quieter than usual. Grace turned. This doesn't feel like me. Maybe it's who you were always meant to be, he said. She held his gaze for a moment. There was something different about the way he was looking at her now. Not like an employee, not even like a colleague. It was something unspoken but powerful, and it scared her. Let's not be late, she said, breaking the moment. In the car ride to the downtown tower where Douglas Kane's firm was headquartered, Grace stared out the window in silence. Ethan was texting someone, presumably his lawyer or financial advisor, but occasionally his eyes flicked toward her reflection. He still couldn't believe she had been right under his nose for 8 months. A linguistic genius, a woman with an Ivy League-level education, a force of nature disguised as a quiet cleaner. He didn't just want her at the meeting, he needed her, but he didn't expect what would happen next. The conference room looked like something out of a movie, glass walls overlooking the river, sleek black chairs, polished chrome fixtures, a massive digital screen at the front displaying Geneva Portland Luxury Hospitality Initiative, Phase 1. Douglas Kane entered with his entourage, 3 associates in tailored suits, 1 woman with an intimidating tablet, and 2 interpreters. But the moment Kane saw Grace, he stopped mid-step. You, he said with a wide smile. You're here. Grace nodded politely. Good to see you again, Mr. Kane. He chuckled. I told Ethan I wouldn't proceed unless you were in the room. I wasn't kidding. Everyone turned to look at Ethan, who gave a short, surprised laugh. That's a first for me. She's sharper than anyone you've sent me in years, Kane added. I assumed she was your senior strategist. Grace blinked. Strategist Ethan nodded slowly. She is, starting today. The meeting began, and Grace transformed. Her voice was calm but commanding. When the Swiss team switched to French to discuss cross-border taxation, Grace responded without missing a beat. When Kane shifted into Arabic to reference UAE hospitality models, she pivoted effortlessly. When zoning laws were mentioned in Portuguese, she translated for Ethan and asked clarifying questions that no one else had thought to raise. She didn't just translate words, she translated meaning, tone, and culture. By the end of the presentation, Douglas Kane was leaning back in his chair with a satisfied smirk. You two make a damn good team, he said, glancing between Grace and Ethan. Ethan, you've got yourself a secret weapon. Ethan smiled, but something twisted in his gut. It wasn't just admiration he felt for Grace anymore. It was awe, and something he didn't want to name yet. Back in his car, silence stretched between them. I've never seen anyone handle Kane like that, Ethan finally said. He usually steamrolls everyone. Grace stared at her hands. I just did what I used to do. Before everything fell apart. What did happen? Grace. She hesitated. My dad died when I was 12. My mom worked 2 jobs. I was the overachiever, the scholarship girl. I studied languages because he used to say every new word was like a passport. I believed him. Ethan listened quietly. I graduated top of my class, she continued. But when I applied to firms, I never got past the 3rd round. Someone always had a better look, a better network, or fewer cultural gaps, as one executive called it. After a while, the rejection wears you down. You start cleaning houses to pay rent and tell yourself you'll try again next year. Next year becomes next decade. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's bullshit. She looked at him. It's reality. He pulled the car over near a quiet overlook by the river. The city skyline shimmered in the distance. Come work with me, Grace, he said, turning toward her. Not as a cleaner, not even just as a consultant, as a partner. Her breath caught. I'm not offering this out of pity, he added. I'm offering this because you're the smartest person I've met in a decade, and I know talent when I see it. Grace looked out at the river, heart pounding. It's not that easy. Why not? Because if I say yes, I have to believe I'm allowed to be that woman again. You are, Ethan said softly. You never stop being her. You just stop being seen. Tears welled in Grace's eyes, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. A deep voice on the other end spoke in Arabic, but his tone was far from friendly. You should have stayed invisible. Grace froze. Who is this someone who knows who you really are? Click. The call ended. Ethan noticed her expression immediately. What's wrong? She handed him the phone. I don't know. It was a threat. In Arabic. He stared at the screen. No ID. No trace. Did you recognize the voice? She shook her head, but her skin crawled. Someone knew she was back in the world she once left behind. Someone didn't want her rising again. And this time it wasn't just about her career. It was personal. What do you think the mysterious call means? Who do you think doesn't want Grace to rise again, and why? Comment your theories below. The silence in Ethan's car was crushing. Grace stared out at the river, her hands clenched in her lap, the chilling words from the anonymous caller repeating in her mind, you should have stayed invisible. She'd fought so hard to rise, to reclaim the version of herself that once believed in dreams. But now someone wanted to drag her back into the shadows. I need to know who called you, Ethan said firmly, taking the wheel and pulling back onto the road. We're going to get to the bottom of this. No, Grace replied softly. Not yet. Grace, I know that voice, she said, a shiver in her tone. Not the name, but the arrogance, the tone. It sounded like someone I used to know in grad school, a competitor. Someone who mocked me every time I answered questions better than him in class. You think this is about jealousy? Ethan asked. No, Grace said. It's about control. I wasn't supposed to come back. I wasn't supposed to win. She turned to Ethan, her voice trembling but clear. And that's exactly why I have to keep going. Over the next week, Grace threw herself into work at Ethan's firm. She was no longer the silent cleaner in the background. She was now leading multilingual negotiations, helping secure new contracts in Lisbon and Geneva, and advising on intercultural design strategies. Clients loved her. Employees admired her. But not everyone was happy. Whispers started swirling in the office about a cleaning lady becoming a power player, about favoritism, about how she must have something on Ethan to climb so fast. Grace heard them all. She smiled anyway. She'd heard worse. Ethan, meanwhile, was growing more protective. He brought in cybersecurity experts to trace the anonymous call. He watched the cameras. He kept Grace close in meetings, not just out of professionalism, but out of something he could no longer deny. He was falling for her, and fast. One night after a particularly long meeting, Ethan invited Grace to dinner, not at a five-star restaurant, but at a small Lebanese cafe on the edge of the city. It reminded her of home, of simpler days. As they sat beneath string lights and shared warm pita and hummus, Ethan looked at her and said quietly, "Do you ever wish it had all gone differently?" Grace took a sip of mint tea. "Sometimes, but then I realize, if things had gone differently, I might never have ended up here, sitting across from someone who actually sees me." Ethan reached across the table and gently took her hand. "I see you, Grace. I see everything you are. And I want you to know, no matter where this goes or what offers come your way, I believe in you." She smiled, tears brimming in her eyes. But just as the moment deepened, her phone buzzed again. "Blocked number." Ethan's expression darkened. "Answer it." She did. But this time there was no voice, only silence. And then, a recording from years ago, her graduation speech. "Let language be the bridge between our cultures, not the barrier. Let visibility be our starting point, not our destination." She froze. That speech had never been uploaded publicly. Someone from her past was trying to rattle her, not with threats, but with memory. She hung up. "That confirms it," Ethan said, his voice sharp. "Someone from your university, someone who knew you back then." "I think I know who it is," Grace said, pulling up an old student record she still had saved. "Leon Keller. He dropped out after failing his thesis presentation. Blamed me for stealing the spotlight. He's working in a tiny consulting firm in Zurich now." Ethan nodded. "Let's pay him a visit." 2 weeks later, Grace and Ethan were in Zurich for the Global Expansion Summit. Their firm had just been approved to manage a cross-cultural integration project for one of Europe's biggest luxury hotel chains. Grace was the keynote speaker. As she stepped onto the stage in a flowing gray suit, the crowd fell silent. She didn't use a PowerPoint. She didn't read a script. She spoke from her soul. "I stand here today not as a title or a resume or a role. I stand here as someone who was once invisible, who answered a phone she wasn't supposed to touch, and who discovered that the line between seen and overlooked is sometimes just one person willing to believe in you." People were crying and clapping, including someone at the back, Leon Keller. She spotted him instantly. He didn't look menacing. He looked small. She didn't call him out. She didn't seek revenge because she didn't need to. Grace had already won. Back in Portland weeks later, Ethan stood in the sunlit courtyard of his estate, now partially renovated into a hybrid cultural co-working space. Grace stepped out with 2 mugs of coffee. "You really tore down your private office," she teased. Ethan smiled. "Well, you said the best ideas come when we collaborate. I figured I better listen to my partner." She handed him his coffee. "You know, I got another offer this morning. Geneva, permanent executive position." Ethan's jaw tightened for a second, but then relaxed. "And I turned it down." He stared at her. Why? Grace smiled. "Because home isn't a city. It's a place where someone believes in you, fights for you, and shares hummus on a Tuesday night without checking his stock portfolio." Ethan chuckled, then set down his coffee. "Grace," he said, taking her hands, "I don't want to just be your business partner." She looked up at him. "I want to build something with you. Bigger than offices, bigger than contracts." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. Grace Nolan, will you build this life with me, not just as my partner in business, but as my partner in everything? Tears spilled over her cheeks as she whispered, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and the courtyard erupted in quiet applause from their team, from the friends they now called family. From the world that finally saw her, and she saw herself, not as the cleaner, not as the translator, but as the woman who picked up the phone and answered her destiny. What did you think of Grace's journey from invisibility to empowerment, from silence to voice, from rejection to love? If this story moved you, comment 100 below and let us know where you're watching from. Are you in the US, Europe, Asia? Tell us your country. We love seeing our global community. And don't forget, share this story with someone who needs a reminder that their voice matters. Sometimes all it takes is one moment of courage and one person who truly sees you. See you in the next story.